Chapter 7. The image of the token nibbled around the edges of William's mind for a couple of days. He kept thinking about it. On Friday afternoon, when he went up to the attic, he found Sir Simon had zapped a mouse with it. The knight was standing over the small dead body, cleaning the blade of his dagger. "Where did he come from?" William asked. "I think he smelled the food in the kitchen. I must say, it does look like the kind of thing a mouse would eat," Sir Simon said scornfully. "Anyway, I cornered him in the great hall and pointed the token at him from a safe position behind the door of the chapel. Could you bring me a fire stick from your hearth when you next come?" "What for?" William asked suspiciously. "I prefer my meat roasted, although I will eat the mouse raw if need be." "I don't see why you have to eat him at all," William said grumpily. "I must keep my strength up." "All right, I'll get some matches for you if you promise to get him ready while I'm gone." When William returned with a box of matches, a small quantity of wood shavings from the fireplace box, and some other supplies, the knight had cleaned and skinned the mouse. William struck a match and lit the small fire in the kitchen. "I wouldn't have to keep a fire going all night if I had those magic sticks," Sir Simon said. "But since I cannot strike them myself, I will use the wood to keep my fire fueled through the night." "I brought you this, too, in case of sparks," William said, as he put down a small mustard jar filled with water and a toothpaste cap for scooping it out. "Please be careful, Sir Simon. My father would be furious if he knew there was a fire going in the attic." The knight nodded absent-mindedly, and William left him humming cheerfully as he turned the spit. It was almost the end of April. Mrs. Phillips would be leaving in a week. William asked her to come and watch his gymnastics practice because she would be gone before his big meet. "Are you still worried about the floor exercise?" Mrs. Phillips asked as they were waiting for the bus. "Yes, I haven't gotten it right yet. Robert says I've been lazy, but it's something else." "What?" He shrugged. "Sounds stupid, but I think I'm scared of the point where my neck hits the mat. It might snap or something." "That doesn't sound stupid. It sounds perfectly reasonable. You've been scared before, William, and you've always gotten over it." He smiled. "I remember how terrified I was of doing a round-off. It seems silly. But now you're going away," he thought, "and that makes everything different." Robert and Mrs. Phillips understood one another. She had attended William's meets ever since he started gymnastics at the age of 6. Robert had taught her how to spot William on the more difficult floor exercises, and William knew they both believed in his ability, although they had very different ways of showing it. When they arrived at the gym, Robert directed Mrs. Phillips to a chair where she had an unobstructed view. The team warmed up and started out with a straddle press on the parallel bars. Then they moved directly to the floor exercises. "William, we will start with your routine," Robert said. "Don't forget your sense of space. Before you start, you should always know where you are going to land. Are you ready?" William looked at Mrs. Phillips. She did not smile or nod, but he could feel her concentrating on him. He walked to the corner of the mat, tightened his body, and took a deep breath. The start was slow, with a round-off followed by a whip-back and a lay-out somersault. By the third pass across the mat, his body and mind were working together, and he knew in that instant, just before the round-off, that he was going to make it. 2 flip-flops and both shoulders touched the mat evenly for the dive roll. Up again, tight body, arms outstretched. He was standing just where he wanted to land, 2 feet from Mrs. Phillips. Her smile was so wide, it seemed to spread from one corner of the gym to the other. The team burst into applause, but it faded away quickly. Everyone was watching Robert. At last, he nodded his approval. "You should come to every practice, Mrs. Phillips," he said, still looking at William. "William only gives us his best when you are here." "Robert's right," William said over dinner that night. "I won't be able to do it that well again." "Why not?" she asked. "You'll be gone. You won't be here to watch me." "William, it had nothing to do with me," she said. "It was your mind and body working together, concentrating on the job you had to do. I'm not your good luck charm. I don't think you'll believe that until I leave." They played a game of chess after dinner. He watched her studying the board, lips pursed, chin in her hands. "Is your head going to fall off?" he asked quietly, and they both smiled at the old joke. When he was younger, it had been her way of reminding him to take his elbows off the table. "Silly bishops," she muttered, glaring at the board. "They just get in the way. I'll give you this one if you like it," she offered. "No way," William replied, grinning. "I know your old tricks. That just clears the way to my queen." She made a face at him and went back to staring at the board. As he waited for her next move, he turned a pawn over and over in his hand. Its size reminded him of the Silver Knight. "I wish I could hold her in my hand like this," he thought. "Then she couldn't go away from me." He sat up suddenly. He could make her small and keep her. Of course he could, with the token. All that day and the next, the idea grew inside of him until he could think of nothing else. The day before she was supposed to leave, he went up to see the Silver Knight, who was in the stable yard thrusting his dagger into an imaginary enemy. "You'll be ready for anything when the time comes," William said, settling down next to the castle. "I do rather hope it comes soon," the knight said, adjusting his belt. "My subjects will have completely forgotten me by the time I return." "It must be lonely up here all day," William said. "It's too bad I can't visit more often." "Yes, and a bit of a female companionship would not be unwelcome," the knight said. "A lord needs a lady, William." "Exactly what I've been thinking," William replied gleefully. "And I have just the lady for you." "Do you now? And who might that be?" "Mrs. Phillips, the Lady Eleanor. Actually, she knows you, although you've never met. She's the one who gave me the castle." "And is her face fair, and are her ways pleasant?" the knight asked. "I should not like to share my castle with a rough barmaid or a servant girl." "Very pleasant, my lord. I can't think of anyone better." "And what would Mrs. Phillips think of sharing the castle with Sir Simon?" William wondered for a moment. He put the thought quickly out of his mind. He would worry about that later. "All right, then. When will you bring her?" "Tomorrow night, but I'll need the token. I'll have to do it at the front walk, just as she's going to the bus stop, when her back is turned." "She does not know what you are going to do?" William hesitated. "No, not exactly. But I'm sure she'll be happy once she's here." The knight was frowning. "Under your protection." "As Alistair once told me, there is a price to be paid when you meddle with the person's allotted time," the knight said. "She will be leaving your world to come into this one. If she should do that willingly, she may re-enter her own world at the exact moment she left. But unwillingly—" He shook his head. "What happens?" William asked. "She loses time in her own world." "Perhaps you could warn her first," the knight suggested hopefully. "Tell her what a strong and honest man I am. I will protect her from any harm."